Okay, let me ask you a question for the audience about the survivor benefit plan. Can you speak and educate them about that?
Yeah, I sure can, Phoenix. So the survivor benefit plan is a DoD program that allows a retiree to ensure that after death, there's a continuous lifetime annuity available for their family, for their dependents, or whoever they should name as their survivors. It's based off of a percentage of their retired pay, and it's paid to the eligible benefits upon death of the service member. And essentially what the retiree does is they pay premiums for their SBP coverage. Upon retiring, it's automatically taken out of their check by DFAS. You'll see it on your account roll-up, on your retired account roll-up where you have your allotments. So it's paid out of your gross retired pay before taxes are taken out. So it doesn't count as your income. It's taken out before your income roll-up. And so that's less out-of-pocket expense for the service member and less cost for the SBP.
Yeah. So if your spouse didn't have income or career, let's say, in that type of family situation, then you'll receive your pension. But if you pass away, your spouse will still be receiving that Ayotte benefit. Yeah. And it's really a form of insurance. It's not.
It is. It's a lot like life insurance. It's kind of like life insurance. It sort of fills that function. It's not called life insurance. And one of the things to keep in mind is that it's based on a percentage of your retired pay. So it may not be enough to cover the expenses that your dependents may have after the veteran passes. So they need to understand what that amount is and whether or not it meets the need. In all likelihood, it probably will not. So it will probably have to be plussed up by some other form of life insurance, whether you choose term or whole life. Up to you. There are a lot of options out there, including options from the Veterans Administration, where while you're on active duty, you have the SGLI, Service Member Group Life Insurance, which a lot of veterans take advantage of. I did while I was on active duty, and that's a really good deal for veterans. You can get up to $400,000 of coverage if you elect to do so. And then after you transition, you can roll that over into a veterans group life insurance, where the premiums are a bit higher than what they were when you're on active duty, but they're still very competitive with what's on the outside market. In fact, they're probably, from my research, at least for the first few years that you've retired, they're very competitive with what's on the outside market. But every 5 years, they adjust the monthly cost that you're going to have to pay, and it starts to go up after 10 years of retired service. It really starts to jump very high, and at that point, you may want to think about a civilian, probably term life option at that point, where you have a consistent monthly payment every year, whether it's a 20-year policy or a 10-year policy or whatever.
How do you make the election to roll the SGLI over into the veterans?
It's very easy. You can do it all online. You go through the VA website, and you can do it by paper if you want and mail it in, or you can do it online. You can roll it over. There's no medical exam required. They take you as you are, especially if you're going from the service members group life to veterans group life. It's a very easy and seamless process from my experience.
You don't have to do the whole examination or all of that. You just roll it, right?
No, and that's one of the benefits of it, because with most civilian companies, you're going to have to do some sort of medical exam. If you go with Prudential or Hartford or somebody. However, there are some programs, if you go with USAA or Navy Mutual, they have some options where you may not have to.
You might not have to, right? Talk to us about powers of attorney while you're serving and after you're serving, if you know, and sort of when it's important, and can you just get the one that's provided by DOT?
Yeah.
What do you recommend as a leader?
Powers of attorney are something you want to be very careful with, of course, because you're giving an awful lot of legal authority to somebody. So you need to choose who you're giving that power of attorney to very carefully. Again, I think while you're on active duty, particularly when you're junior, the Navy Legal Service Office could help you, with those, and they can certainly help you point you in the right direction on what you should do. And then I think as your career matures, then you gain more assets and more dependence and more risk. You may want to go with a more complex option and go out in town and look for a attorney out in town that has familiarity with the military, perhaps former military, and can work with you and advise you on powers of attorneys for specific situations. But they're really important while you're on active duty, particularly while you're deployed, you're away from home. If something needs to be done at home, many service members want to make sure that their spouse or their parents, have a power of attorney that could act on their behalf if something should happen. If creditors should come knocking at your door while you're deployed, or someone tries to foreclose on your home while you're deployed, or, a lot of things can go south.
Honestly, simpler things, speaking from the spouse perspective, just calling T-Mobile or Comcast, and they're like, we got to get the other person on the phone for this account. And it can just be one of those things that grinds on whoever is left behind. And then if you're leaving your child in the care of someone else as their guardian, you need to have the appropriate powers of attorney for that.
Actively medical power of attorney.
Medical power of attorney.
Medical decisions and
deal with the school.
Just a whole plethora of things that you really need to think about.
I find that transitioning service members, that there is a big segment of the community that then becomes defense contractors, or they become and deploy sort of in defense security situations, but also work for companies or other contractors where they travel. So the need to think through this isn't usually removed for many people.
Yep, not by any stretch. Yeah, absolutely right.
So then if we sort of touched a little bit on, you said a little more complex. A little more complex usually means a trust. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about, if you can, what circumstances a prior service member would have, or maybe an active duty person where they might want to consider having a trust instead of a simple will or a simpler estate plan?
Well, I think, a trust in many respects does a lot of the things that a will does for you. But I think it takes in more situations, more variables than a will does. A will is pretty simplistic, and particularly even if you're a service member and say your wife has a side business or for the female service members, if your husband has a side business, or if you're retired and you've transitioned and you've started your own business, then you really want to start looking at having a trust, because you're bringing in the business aspect of it and the assets and the purchasing power of what your business may or may not have purchased. And I think it's simple, or just to start with a trust from the beginning, rather than having a very basic will and then realizing, I need to do this all over. I need to do a trust. So if you start with a trust, and then you could just amend that trust as your situation becomes more complicated and you take on more assets and your business grows.
I couldn't agree more. And so what's unique about, I'll tell you this, in estate planning land, the risk reward or cost benefit analysis of going with a trust over will usually comes down to the upfront cost versus how much you're going to lose if your estate has to go through probate. And it's a no-brainer. If that's why we start recommend thinking about it, if you're over $100,000 in liquid assets, or if you have a complicated family situation. So what are some examples of service member asset portfolios that would sort of put them into this category besides a business?
Yeah, I think a service member transitions. Service members should look at it as an investment in themselves and their future. So that upfront cost, though it may be higher, is worth it as it often is with investments. You kind of take that risk, but this is a sound risk to take. So you've got investments you've procured over a career, whether it be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, treasuries, crypto, or any hard assets. If you're a collector and you collect the coins, or if you're into numismatics, or
From just all your chores, like sometimes people have very valuable
or,
collections.
valuable jewelry that your family has collected because, you're a military service member and you've bought your spouse, expensive jewelry for Christmas or birthdays or whatever.
Mm-hmm. What about real estate?
Real estate is certainly one. You've got, if you're living in a home, or if you've procured homes or real estate or investment properties, or even a plot of land somewhere that you invested, you've got to keep track of that and make sure that is covered. You've got vehicles. Vehicles today are quite an investment. They're depreciating investment, but they're still investing.
Depends on the vehicle. Yeah. Certainly some of them are depreciating faster than others now.
You've got insurance policies out there of various types. You've got Social Security to take care of. If, tied to insurance, and some folks ought to be looking at this, is long-term care policies. When you look at the cost of long-term care, what it is now, where it's projected to go, sometimes those policies make a lot of sense.
I love that you're bringing that up because I'm a huge advocate for a long-term care policy. And if you get into it in your 40s, really serves you well because they kind of have a hybrid model now where it's long-term care. Also, it just transitions into like a life insurance policy as well. So
and that all ties into estate planning and wills and everything, and they're all kind of interconnected. And then the other item, of course, is your VA benefits that are out there. There's a host of VA benefits, and they're worth quite a bit of money when you stop adding them up. Not just your disability, but education benefits out there with your Montgomery GI Bill, or your post 9/11 GI Bill for most of us. And whether or not you use that yourself or you transfer it to a dependent, you want to make sure that benefit is still there if you should depart this world early.
Those are special clauses that are in estate plans that are unique to service members or prior service members. And so I would say service members want to make sure that they're asking the attorney who's drafting it for them these specific questions and make sure that they're well researched. Well, thank you very much for the estate planning portion.
Yeah, absolutely.